What is up, guys? Today I've got for you a spicy little deck profile by the name of Gold Pride Punk. So let's get right into it. To start, we have the best card in the deck and one of the best cards in the entire game that is, for some reason, not at 1 or 0, Emergency Teleport. This card is a starter, it is an extender, and it is not once per turn. Seeing multiple of these is the best thing you can ask for. It's ridiculous. Now, of course, that card wouldn't be very good if it didn't have a good target, but of course we have plenty. Our first good target being Xiamen. This is the starter for our deck. It gets us everything. We also have one Ogre Dance just to see it more often, but also because we need level 8s in this deck. This will be explained later. Next, we've got 2 Foxy Tune. This card is E-Telly 2.0. Unfortunately, you need to discard, but sometimes that's fortunate. But most importantly, it's just more ways into Xiamen and a way to extend. And now, of course, the normal target for Foxy, we have the one Sharakusai. This gets us our fusion and a quick synchro on our opponent's turn. Very important. Some boards you won't bounce 4, other boards you just turn this into the chariot carry. Now, when we make our fusion, we'll send it off for 2 cards pretty much every time. That'll be Deer Note and Wagon. Deer Note is crazy as a Graveyard Reborn, plus it's a level 5, which this deck doesn't have too many non-tuners, so it being level 5 is pretty important for the strategy in and of itself. And then, of course, Wagon is insane because it gets you Pot of Greed plus Marauding Captain. It's kind of crazy that this card exists, but I am very happy about it. Now, of course, to proc the Extreme Sessions, to get our draws, we need to have Jawari and her target. Sorry. Well, yeah, just Jawari, but Madam Spider and her target. This is one of 2 procs one of 2 effects that proc the field spell, because when you go through your normal line, you'll go through Xiamen, Foxy, Sharakusai, all before you activate Extreme Sessions, and the only cards that really proc Extreme Sessions are Spider, Wagon, Sharakusai, Xiamen, and the Synchro, as well as Punisher, but that card doesn't come up nearly as often. Either way, you need this to get your draw 2, and who says no to a free Imperm? And then we'll have 2 targets for our level 8 Synchro for the level 3 Tuner Search. So the first one is Ghost Ogre. This is pretty standard. In pretty much every punk list, you'll see a Ghost Ogre. It's just a free search target, so pretty much everyone likes it. And then, of course, well, not of course, this is my first tech piece, is Psychic Tracker. Something that this deck has a hard time finding are non-tuners, and this is my solution. It's also a level 3 Psychic, so we can bring it out off of Emergency Teleport. And we can also search it with the Amazing Jam Dragon, which is really useful for this. This is just another target for that, because at some point you do run out of punk names. But yeah, that'll pretty much wrap up the punk engine. The one real thing to note is that we're only playing 1 Deer Note. I want to play it at 2, just so that turn 3 is easier to play, but I bricked too much, at least with the build I've been playing with. I have made some modifications, but I think you can get away with 1, so we just play 1. And then we'll head to the Gold Pride section here. So to start, 3 Leon, pretty standard. He's really good as an extender. He's a level 3. He reborns. He does everything you really need him to, and he's just an important piece to make the deck work. This is a card that you could cut down lower, but for my sake, I'm not, because I play 3 Baller, which is something that may not be exactly standard. But the reason I play 3 of each is so that I can guaranteed get to Baller off of Start Your Engines. And occasionally you need to go Leon instead, because you'll have a Baller Engrave and no Gold Prides on board. And when that happens, if you don't go Leon and then bring out Baller, you can't really fuse unless you've got one in hand. Baller being a level 5 is useful for extension into some of the punk cards, since he's not a tuner. But also he's a way that we make Baron. So he's very useful to have, even if you draw him. He's not truthfully dead. Now, of course, to search for the trap, we'll have the 1 carry. That's pretty standard. And then we have the Better Luck Next Time at 1. Some play it at a higher number. Instead of playing 2 of that, I'll play 1 of the Quick Play spell to Reborn. They can summon a monster for all we care. We really don't mind it. We'll either use it as absorption fodder, or we'll Baron pop it if we made Baron on this turn. Or we've got a lot of ways to deal with it, so them getting 1 body that's negated really isn't a problem. Because this also lets us play around or through nib, right? If we put up our whole board and then they nib us, we can bring back the Leon, and Leon can bring back the Baller either on our turn or during our opponent's draw phase. Alternatively, we can use it to bring out the Nitro Head. This card is FTK versus Kashtira. It has very funny uses with Sharakusai since it's an 8. And then also, since it's an 8, we have easier access to Baron. So we have to play the Nitro Head. It's just so good. Next, we'll get into our non-engine. This is pretty much Kashtira hate. So we've got 3 Imperm, and 3 Chalice, and 3 Ash. So Imperm Ash kind of makes sense. A lot of people running these cards, they're just generically good. But the Chalice I have in here because of exactly a Rice Heart. We need some way to deal with Macrocosmos, and this is the most powerful way, or at least the easiest way to do it. We don't have to commit any resources to it other than an Imperm, so it's essentially just more Imperms. But it's also a card that we can set going first, you know? Because when you go first, you do a lot of drawing. You don't always see it, and so you want cards that are either hand traps or cards that you can set. And that this fills pretty much both voids, since we aren't even going to Imperm on our opponent's turn unless we are feeling really ballsy. Because you can Imperm the Unicorn, but it's not very good to do that. Ash is just really good, especially into Branded. We need to be able to deal with Branded, and this is the best way to do it. Because you hit the Fusion, and now they can't play. It's really funny, actually. But it also hits Theosis, so that makes this card pretty useful. There are other niche uses, such as hitting the Hugin and the Runic Sprite, Live Twin or Runic Sprite for hire. Either way, it's really good. I wish I could play Econ or Book in this list, but I haven't been able to justify it because of the Live Twin, Runic, or the for hire Runic lists. So we're stuck with, I think, these 9 cards, though they are, if you have a better idea, this is always subject to change. But I don't think it gets much better than this to deal with what's currently the problems. And now for the spicy tech card. We're playing 3 Assault Synchron. I had this as Kashtira Fenrir, because Fenrir was really good to go first. Just put him on the board, and then you search for another Fenrir, so that when you go Foxy Tune, you go hand neutral. But we're going with Assault now, because this card, when you play Pride, isn't dead when you see Pride. Fenrir, when you see Pride, was really rough, because you'd have all these Pride cards in hand, but nothing to do with them. And this starts that, since to special it, you have to lose life points, which makes this pretty powerful. This also turns any stray level 8 you just have on board into a Baron, and that's really, really good. If you see this in Nitro Head, or this and then either of the level 8 Punk monsters, you can turn them into a Baron, because both of these say tribute a Punk on your side of the field to special from hand. So you can use either of these two plus an Assault, sorry, and then you're making Baron. Alternatively, when you have a Synchro 8 on board that you don't really need, you can turn that into the Baron, or you can use the Nitro Head. So really what it does is turn on a lot of playing, and then also makes it so you don't really lose to your own hands, which has been a problem for the deck. Next, we'll go ahead and get into the extra deck. So first we have the one Rising Carp. It's pretty much mandatory, and I wish I didn't have to play Sharkusai in it, but it just gives you too much value despite losing to Ash. We've got Jam Dragon Drive. This card is our Searcher. It's another level 8. Both of these are level 8, so that lets you turn into Baron if it gets left over. This plus Sharkusai makes the level 11 Synchro, which is a bounce for the whole board. It's also a Reborn during your turn, but you can only use 1 effect per turn. So this is it's a weird card, but it allows you to bring him out, summon back the Carp, and then either use the Assault to make Baron, or use another level 3 to make Punisher. And when you do that, you can make it so he attacks twice. It's very, very powerful. It's one of the better ways to OTK without really committing too much. It like forces them to, and if they've got Nib by the time you do it, you can just continue playing afterwards. The next engine, obviously the Gold Prides. So we have one of all the good ones. We're not playing the Link because it kind of sucks, but we've got Star Leon, which is honestly optional. I almost never make him, but it's important to have him in case you get to turn 4+. Because he turns Seeing Leon into essentially winning the game, because you'll special Leon, grab carry, make Leon, Star Leon, pop one of their cards, beat in even, and then this leaves, brings out little Leon, and then Leon can grab back another card if you need to. You can't do that all in the same turn, but that's just how it is. They all have the effect where they'll go back to the extra deck the turn their effect is activated. So that's why you can all play all of them at 1, though this card's not actually played at 1, but it could be. Regardless, you can play all these at 1 and get away with it, since they all bounce back. The rest of this extra deck is entirely tech pieces. So we're going to start with the Exceed package. So this could be any rank 3. I just have a second carry because in the longer matches, having the ability to get to another spell or dump another card is actually important. But the real reason it's in here is we're making Zeus into Kashtira as often as possible. If you're playing into Kashtira and you're having a hard time, just Zeus their board, and it does clear their board, which is kind of scary, but they've lost Prep and Birth, and from there, their hand needs to be, like, exactly Unicorn. And if they have exactly Unicorn, then you're fine. Like, it's not perfect, but they go Unicorn, Unicorn, Theosis, Theosis target, and then you Zeus, and the Theosis misses. So, even in a worst-case scenario, this gets you into the game, which is really important. It's also just good into, like, back row matchups. So, establishing Zeus is never really bad. But yeah. So, we've got a few Synchro 8s here. This pair is kind of crazy. So, Dragite, what Dragite does is say, Branded, I'm not scared of you, because we have a lot of waters. Waters, including carry and main deck. So we can make it quite often. And when we make it, it's a spell Trap Negate, which says no Branded Fusion. And if you have Ash, it says no lost, and then you Ash the Branded Fusion. This just turns off Branded. Now, Draco Berserker, the 10 is actually so crazy going second. So the way it reads is you can get rid of 3 cards on one turn. If they activate a monster effect, you can banish it, which means you can force a Rice Art effect, even if it's negated. So if you go Dark Ruler, and then, a card gets banished, you can then chain Draco Berserk to the activation of the Rice Art to get rid of it. And then you can beat an effect monster, and once you beat the effect monster, its effect lets you gain that effect monster's attack and make another attack. So this can clear up to 3 cards all by itself, which is really nice. It just also happens to be a Synchro 8, which we are able to make a good chunk of. So it's worth having. Of course, we've got these two. These two are pretty much this one specifically is in every Punk build ever, and Baron's just so good that if you can make it, then you should do it. Which is why I had been running Fenrir, and why we're now running Assault Synchron, since Assault Synchron is a 2, and we have a lot of 8s. So that makes this work out really well. Punisher just gets super big and makes a lot of really unmanageable situations very manageable, especially if you use the continuous spell to search out Nitro Head, since that makes you take 2300 damage by itself. Onto the very funny 2 pieces of tech cards here. So the first one is Malon. This I expect to actually come up at some point, especially when you're playing some random stupid Floodgate deck. So anyone who plays Ultimate Slayer knows the second effect of this card, where if this is sent to the graveyard, you can compulse 1 card on the field, period. Good, that's good enough, right? But its first effect is actually crazy for this deck, and it's part of the reason we want run Psychic Tracker. It's a level 6 Synchro, and it's a tuner. What this means is we can make it with either Carry or the Psychic Tracker, and on summon, its effect says either increase or decrease this card's level by 1. So it can either be a level 7 tuner or a level 5 tuner. With that, we can use either the Tracker or the Carry, which we haven't used if we make it up to a 7, in order to make Baron, or we can put it down to a 5 and use the Roller Baller or a Deer Note if we happen to have Deer Note on field to make a Baron. Either way, this lets you make Baron plus clear a face-up. Very, very powerful. This final slot is something I've been testing with, or trying to figure out for a little bit now. I had link spots in here, but now I have Ancient Fairy Dragon. This functions as a time card, funnily enough, but that's not really the purpose I have put it in for. Since it's a 7, it lets us make it with Assault plus either 5. It happens to have the benefit that it's a time card, which is something this deck very, very badly needs, but also important is that it gets you another summon from hand, and sometimes you'll have a hand that's just stuck with a Punk in there, and you want to do something with it, anything with it, but you can't summon it. Either you've used the field spell to already summon, or you've used your normal, or you just don't have the ability to summon it. Maybe you drew it late. Either way, this is another extender piece, which can turn into a Baron with any of the 3s, which is just funny. But a time card plus an extender just sounds like it's something that should be played with this deck. So we put it in, though this could also be, say, something like F.A. Dawn Dragster, or alternatively just a different Synchro 10. But there isn't a really good Synchro 10 that we can make. I mean, we could make Chaos Angel, but it's not worth it. Regardless, I think this is a very funny tech card that can probably win you some times in game, despite the fact that this deck is horrible with time. But yeah, that is pretty much the entirety of the main deck. Now we're going to head to the side deck. This has a few pieces that I'm a little iffy on at the moment. Some pieces I could absolutely change, but there are, I'd say, 6 cards up to 9 cards that are absolutely mandatory. So I'm going to start with Cosmic. In this current format, Cosmic reads I'm a starter, and I'm going to deal with Runic for you, which is two important pieces as Runic is gaining popularity with the Sprite, Live Twin, and Runic variants, for higher variants. So being able to deal with their fountain and have it make it so that they can't do anything about it is just very good. And then since you pay 1,000, if you have, your Gold Pride cards, well, now you can play. And you don't even have to use a effect of the P.u.n.k cards. The next card, very good going first, is Anti-Spell Fragrance. If you give your opponent if you give yourself Nitro Head, and then you give your opponent a token, and then you flip Anti-Spell, there isn't many cards in the game that they can really use here, because the token will turn off. The token by itself turns off Anti-Spell and Lightning Storm, right? But Anti-Spell Fragrance turns off every power spell in the entire game. So now you've essentially told them, well, any cards you have to even the playing field, you cannot play here. So you have to beat me with your monsters. It also turns off Pendulum, funny enough, but that's not the point. And there aren't many decks that can beat the end board of P.u.n.k Pride with just monsters, if any. So if you resolve Anti-Spell plus the token, you've won the duel at that point. And then the final piece, which is actually the spice piece, but it's a good going first card as well as situationally second, is Mistaken Arrest. So initially, it seems like a bit of a rough piece to put in since we do a lot of searching and adding. But of course, you just activate it after you've done all your stuff. But what really made me think this should be in the list is the Sprite Runic, and then either Live Twin or for higher decks, because they do a lot of adding, and one Ash Blossom or one Bell just isn't enough. You can't just stop the draw once. You have to do it at least for like 2 turns, because 2 turns is probably enough of a window to make it so that you can win from there. It's just also another good going first card. And then going second, it has its utility. So I think it's very sleeper right now, but it's probably a card that is worth playing. I think this might even turn off the Labyrinth FTK, or I guess it's turn 2 kill, right, with the Eradicator, because they need to have a 2600 or 2500 monster on the board, and they search the 2500 or the trap that brings them out from, Ariana. And if you're able to stop that search so they can't have the welcome or the big welcome, and they don't have it, or they don't have the big one, then they can't really resolve it on you. But this deck isn't particularly weak to that, but it's just another use case, which is important for pretty much every card in this deck. And then we have got the final 6, which I'm not sold on, but I have some compelling reasonings behind. So first, Ghost Bell was really easy to put in this list because we are scared of Gimmick Puppet Lock, which is also why we have Ash in the main. Anything that stops the Gimmick Puppet Lock is worth putting in this deck, so we've got Ghost Bell. And for a little bit, I had Droplet, but the cost is almost too big to justify it, though theoretically it should still be in. I'm just not scared enough of Brandon. I mean, I am, but I'll just see Ash, so it's not a problem, right? Since Sanctifier isn't targetable, it's kind of annoying, but we'll cope. Finally, we have Talents. This card's fucking ridiculous right now. If you can play it, you should. There's just enough matchups where I don't want to see this, or I just want to go first, and even if you interrupt me, it's not a problem. That Talents doesn't do enough for me, especially since Droll is in the format. If Droll were in the format, this card goes back in the main, and so would Omega, because you could hand it for 2 at that point, and that's ridiculous. But as it stands, I think this card's ridiculous. It's hard not to include in any list whatsoever, but we've got it in the side, because honestly, the main deck just doesn't have space for it. And I think the main deck is really tooled for exactly Kashtira, Branded, and Sprite. And if we've got any gaps, we've tried to address it in the side. We could probably have Dark Ruler somewhere in here. That would be pretty good. The reason we don't run that, again, is the Sprite Runic variant. I'm kind of scared of it, not because it's like so insanely good, but I have a lot of friends who've been playing it recently, and the Runic cards are what scare me most about that deck, because once they go Live Twin, you're like, oh, okay, whatever. Or you can just take their Griffin, or, whatever you need to. The Dark Ruler doesn't seem to do enough into that list. For Kashtira, this is to take a Rise Heart to make Zeus and hold the Fenrir hostage. Not the Fenrir, the Rise Heart, because they have the one Rise Heart. And once we put it under our Zeus, they cannot have it. It's very, very funny. But yeah, so Bell could change, but outside of that, the other considerations are really put Fenrir back in, but I really do like the Assault. We could put Dark Ruler in somewhere, and which is a very good card, but I think the deck can OTK through a little bit of interruption, so I'm trying not to give up that ability because there are a lot of decks that have a lot of recursion right now. And finally, Droplet for especially branded, but a lot of other weird rogue matchups as a go first card, oddly enough. Since you add so many cards and you set so many cards, by the end of your turn, you'll probably have, we'll have probably a monster here, here, and here. We're going to have, like, field spell, two or three set, the continuous spell, and somewhere between 4, 3, and 5 monsters. So that gives you a lot, plus a few in hand. That gives you a lot of fodder for the Droplet. But going second, it's really weird because it doesn't help you in the matchups you really need help with. So I've decided against it, but it has its use case. So regardless, this has been the world's greatest Gold Pride Punk list. Hopefully this has given you guys some ideas on what you can do for your lists going forwards, and I'm very well open to any ideas you guys can offer for how to improve this deck and how to make it more resilient against some decks that it has a hard time with, because going second, this deck can have a very hard time. Regardless, I really appreciate you guys watching, and have a good day.